Another superb performance from Lando Norris, carrying on where he left off in Mexico, not only to be very quick in the only free practice session we're going to have at Interlagos, but also in qualifying for the sprint race, comprehensively beating his teammate Oscar Piastri to the point where Oscar wasn't even P2, beaten by a brilliant Kimi Antonelli in the Mercedes, who did a wonderful job, particularly in Sector 2, where teammate George Russell had a big moment and couldn't recover from that on his second lap. And Kimi's first lap so quick that even though he didn't go any faster on his second lap on those soft tyres right at the end of Q3, he nonetheless will start on the front row alongside Lando Norris with Oscar Piastri P3. As I say, one of the most interesting parts of the lap was going into turn one, where Oscar, on his first big lap on the soft tyres, remember they were on the medium tyres in SQ1, SQ2, he got onto the soft tyre on his first flying lap, big moment going into turn one, brake too late, locked up, almost lost it, had to come out of the power, and Lando was away. And we're going to talk to Mark Slade in a millisecond about qualifying, and he starts by saying how well Lando was braking into turn one, using the phrase brake very hard and carrying more speed than Oscar Piastri for sure into turn one, and probably than everybody else. But I'd like to make the point also that although Lando, yes, of course, is braking hard, his initial brake input is a little bit softer than Oscar Piastri's. This is a classic example. It's a great corner in which to see that because it's downhill and it's very easy to lock up. It's very easy to go in too deep. And Lando's precision in the way he's using the brakes, no overlap at all, just beautiful application in the first millisecond of the pedal and then braking super hard. He's got everything absolutely right, the four tyres square on the road. Whereas Oscar Piastri looks to be just jabbing the brakes initially a little bit more spikily, if that's the right word, and that was the difference. And this, as Mark Slade says in the interview, and we'll get onto it right now, is probably because Oscar was going through the telemetry after free practice and seeing how late Lando was able to brake into turn one. Anyway, they were the first three in sprint qualifying. Let's talk now to Mark Slade. Recorded this on Zoom just a few minutes after qualifying to get his impression. So Mark, first takeaway from qualifying, I would guess, given how you were talking about Lando's in breaking into turn one at the end of free practice. We didn't actually record that bit, but you were saying how good he was, and he carried that right through into sprint qualifying.
Yeah. He's just got tremendous confidence under braking. He's braking very late and very hard. His apex speeds aren't necessarily faster than the competition, but he's just getting to the corner much more quickly. Whereas other people are struggling with lacking confidence in their car, so probably instability from the rear of the car, or if they have a stable rear, they're understeering once they get to the apex, and his car's just rotating when he wants it to, pretty much. I think we saw a couple of onboards where even he was turn 10, he sort of missed the apex a little bit. Yeah. But I think that just shows it's the nature of this track to be a real test of that balance, and certainly he seems to be quite significantly better than everyone else at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, the big yardstick obviously is against Oscar Piastri, and
yeah.
You were talking about turn one just then specifically, and that's where we saw Oscar on his first run on softs brake too late. In effect, it looked like he just braked too late, had to come out of everything, just get the thing stopped, and lost a couple of tenths just on that first corner.
Yeah,
I think given how good Oscar has been at the first half of the year, amazing to see him getting beaten by Lando on a corner like that. I know it's a different corner, but it's still staggering to see him making that sort of mistake.
It is, and I think I'm pretty sure what's happened there is he's looked at the overlays after the previous sessions, and he's tried to emulate what Lando's doing, and he just can't carry it off. He just hasn't got the car under him or he's not able to drive it precisely enough to get the same performance out of it. So it's quite interesting, but it is surprising that he's struggling because, as you say, we haven't seen that. I guess we've seen that recently in the last race in Mexico. He clearly was struggling, but earlier in the season there was really nothing between them at all. So I suspect that it's more that Lando he's found something in his combination of car setup, tools, his systems, engine braking, brake balance, etc., and he's just hit a sweet spot, and he's developed a confidence, and he's just pushing it.
He looks fabulous in the car. Let me just pause there though, because it's interesting that both Lando, Oscar, and the two Mercedes managed to get a good second lap out of those soft tyres. They went
Yeah,
out early, obviously. And in the case of both McLaren drivers, they both went quicker. I mean, both Lando's laps would have put him on the pole as it happened.
yeah,
But
yeah.
why do you think Verstappen, Alonso, Hadjar only went out very late just to do the one lap? Why would they do that?
Um, Personally, I think it's a mistake. I think they went out thinking that the track grip's continually improving and the new tyre is going to give the best lap, so they left it as late as possible to do that. And to be honest, that's something that particularly Max does pretty normally.
Mm.
He regularly goes out very late on sessions and uses that to his advantage. But I think on this occasion, given the jump from the medium to the soft, even though he'd had a run on the soft in P1, the track temperature dropped quite a lot during that session. So you've got the track dropping, but the grip coming up. It is a different track, and I think for Lando and for Oscar and anyone who did the double cool down, they just learnt a bit more on that first lap. And the tyre being, they brought a harder tyre than last year, I think it's giving them the capability to do those 2 laps. So I think that was well played by McLaren.
Yeah, McLaren and Mercedes. I mean,
And
George
Mercedes, yeah.
George managed to make a mistake and lost effectively a top 3 position to
Yeah,
Kimi Antonelli,
yeah,
who and you got Lando, you got the Ferraris going badly. I did actually say in the live stream that I thought Kimi would go very well around Interlagos because he's going to be so good in Sector 2, and it proved to be the case.
yeah,
He actually was
yeah.
more consistent and better through Sector 2 than George Russell.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that car, um, what we saw in Singapore with the decent, strong front end in lower speed corners, I suspect is something that may well be helping them in Sector 2 on this track as well. Because although they look very different sorts of tracks, the inherent characteristic of a car will make a difference in this sort of corner. So, and there isn't a very high speed change of direction that we had like in Mexico, which I think is where the Mercedes was struggling. So I think potentially it's given them a bit of an advantage, or given the chance to show they're better here.
Yeah, George found what 2/10 on his second lap,
Mm,
whereas Kimi went slightly slower, but still managed
yeah,
to be right up there, P2, which is a great result
yeah,
for him. Max
I,
Verstappen, very slow, Sector 2, ridiculously slow in Sector 2,
yeah,
mediums
and
and
he,
softs, and
yeah,
still very quick on the straight through the speed trap. I mean, you'd imagine after the free practice, they might have put some wing back on the car just to give him some sort of turn in into Sector 2, but he's right on it in Sectors 1 and 3, but Sector 2, he's losing 3/4 tenths.
yeah. It just looks like the car's not dealing with the different types of corners very well,
Mm.
and he's not able to get the bounce he wants out of it. He was very down on the radio apparently, complaining about it and just saying that the car felt like it was broken,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
I think is his comment on when he hasn't got that cross corner balance that
Yeah,
he's happy with, and he has had more recently.
he has.
So it's interesting that this circuit seems to be bringing back older problems from earlier in the season again.
Yeah, I wonder whether the undulations or maybe the bumps of Interlagos mean they've
Maybe
got to go to an uncomfortable ride height on that car now. And you were pointing
it,
out in Mexico that maybe they're right on the edge anyway of their
yeah,
aero envelope.
yeah. And I don't know if you noticed, but I think George had a moment in turn 7 on one of his laps when the back slid, and I think again that just shows it's probably a bit of an aero moment there. Potentially, I suppose, with the wind still coming from the south east, could have some influence in that corner as well. But I think a lot of it is down to how much the cars are on the edge at these low ride heights and the high speed. And the McLaren just seems, generally speaking, more comfortable in that area, although for Oscar, there are other issues that he's struggling with.
Well, you predicted Ferrari would be in trouble and they were running hards right at the end of free practice. And you said, that was
Yeah,
probably a mistake. And it seemed to be. They were just out of it on the medium tire, and Charles was
yeah,
struggling on the soft. And on the medium, of course, in SQ2, he spun at the end. The yellows came out and that destroyed Lewis's lap. And he didn't even
yeah,
make it out of
yeah.
Q2.
It was just comedy of errors, wasn't it, in that sense? And yeah, I don't understand the decision they made. I'm sure they had their reasons for doing it, but it just looked like they hadn't got the balance right. Charles locked up his front into turn 10, wasn't it, before he got on the power too much and spun the car around.
Yeah.
But you could see that both of them were just struggling to get the car stopped and car to the apex at the same time. and you can't help but feel that if they'd had a run on the mediums and even on the softs, potentially at the end of the morning session, they might have had a better handle on where the balance needed to be. Yeah, it's a bit of a strange one again.
Yeah, Aston Martin looking quite good. Fernando actually quickest in SQ2 and did a pretty good job. Like Max, went out late, only did the one run on the soft tires, but quick, not bad at all. Not quick in a straight line compared with his nearest opposition, but the
Yeah.
car's pretty good around the lap.
Yeah, it does. He's obviously using a lot of his experience to get it together there on a tricky track. And I'll be honest, I was slightly surprised because I didn't think that Interlagos was necessarily one of his preferred tracks. He seems to have got it together here. And maybe with both Astons performing pretty well, it reflects that their car also suits this track where there's no proper high speed as such. So maybe it's able to deal with the medium speed a bit better. And so it just looks like they might not have the most efficient car in terms of downforce and drag, but they have a car that, for whatever reason, is hanging on to its front end in the medium speed corners a bit better. And so they're not necessarily having to run as much front end in the car to deal with that as some of the others are. And it's just giving a nicer balance. So there do seem to be circuit characteristics that are coming through in the way that different cars are performing from one event to another.
Yeah. Well, it could be wet tomorrow. It may not be. If it's wet, it could be interesting. If it's dry, it's going to be a Lando walkaway, I would imagine.
It's kind of difficult to see anything else, to be honest. As long as he does a decent start and gets away, then he looks pretty strong at the moment. The wet, well, that's a completely different story, isn't it? As we know, but I mean, at the end of the day, you want the fastest car in the wet, which the McLaren will probably be as well. Yeah. So, but maybe it means that we'll get a bit of a mix-up further down, and potentially gives an opportunity for Oscar to make amends and come back forwards. Yeah, let's see what happens.
Well, at the moment, the McLaren battle heavily going towards Lando Norris yet again, and Max Verstappen continuing to struggle now in his fight to take the championship to the McLaren drivers. So we'll see what happens tomorrow. Mark, thanks so much again for your input.
Thanks very much. Cheers.
I'd like to finish the video today by remembering a great friend and a great Formula One engineer, Peter Wright, who passed away just a couple of days ago, very sadly, in his home in Prestine on the Welsh-English border, where when I rang him just last year, he said, I'm on the phone looking out the window, beautiful fields, lovely sky. Anyway, Peter has left us, one of the great aerodynamicists in Formula One's history, with Colin Chapman, pioneered ground effect. The ground effect that we're enjoying today in Formula One, specifically the effect of skirts. He noticed that in the Imperial College wind tunnel famously, and continued to thrive in Formula One for many years. His background had been with BRM. Tony Rudd was effectively his mentor. Then when Tony Rudd moved to Lotus, Peter Wright was elevated at Lotus as well. Chapman, I know, had enormous respect for Peter Wright. And when he stopped racing, going to races with teams, he then joined the FIA and was instrumental in creating much of the safety we enjoy in Formula One today, particularly around survival cells and protecting the driver. Peter Wright, just outstanding in that area with his team at the FIA. And then in later life, wrote books, flew aircraft, did all sorts of things, loved life. Just a great man. I spoke to him relatively recently about his last book now, sadly, which he just published, self-published. And I think this interview, which I'm going to run just an excerpt from, gives an idea not only of how he thinks as an engineer, how he thought as an engineer, but also how he felt about life, the creation of things, and indeed nature itself.
Very simple. The book is called How Did I Get Here? It works from any country, and I then package up the book and send it to you.
You're going to sign each copy?
No, if I'm requested to, I do sign it.
Well,
not everybody wants their nice new book.
I wish I'd requested your signature on it, but anyway, there you go. You've also got a soft spot, though, I believe, for Mount Fuji, Japan.
I love it, the look of it. It's just so exquisite. And I've seen it from an aeroplane. I've seen where it appeared to be hovering in the clouds. And I found when there was a time when I went to Japan fairly often, I mean, with Lotus being part owned by Toyota, and I was working with Toyota and then racing with Honda. And I always made sure at some point I saw Mount Fuji. And there was one time I went there and I checked in at night in pouring rain into a hotel somewhere near Mount Fuji. And in the morning I woke up, there was a big picture window opposite the bed. And in the window was Mount Fuji in bright blue sky. And at the edge of the window was some cherry blossom. And I thought, okay, yeah, that's about right.
What is it you love? Is it the symmetry of the mountain, which is an unusual symmetry?
I think it's just, it's perfect. There's nothing you can do to change it to make it better. You know, it's quite symmetrical, but it's not perfectly symmetrical. If it was perfectly symmetrical, it would have been drawn by a computer or something, but it's not. It's just the line is just perfect.
In terms of that perfect line, does that also apply to the Lotus 79?
There is an element of truth in that, but that was Martin Ogilvy.
Yeah,
it was him who
if you hadn't done all that stuff at Imperial College, I'm not sure you would have had.
That was all underneath. That was all
I know, but the side pods had to carry it. You know, there's a bit of Peter Wright in there too, I think. But yeah.
Well, it's a wonderful thing of sort of form over function. It retained all the function, and yet Martin made it look nice. I mean, there was a guy called Ken Sears who worked at Lotus on the road cars and concept cars, and he and his sort of group defined what is sophisticated. You know, obviously in reference to cars. And sophisticated is that if you add anything to it or take anything away, you spoil it. And I think you can apply that to Mount Fuji. It's very sophisticated. There's one or two cars in the history of the automobile to which that works.
On which two?
I think the Type 55 Bugatti, with the Jean Bugatti open two-seater body on it, that's pretty difficult to make better, and you don't want to take anything off it. And the other for me is the short wheelbase 250 GT Ferrari. Don't think you can improve on that in any way at all.
Thanks so much for your time.
But I've enjoyed this enormously. Great
Me
stuff.
too. Thank you so
All
much.
right, Peter.
Peter Wright, we'll miss him.